It was a Thursday. I remember because I always brought Sam his favorite banana muffins on Thursdays, still warm in a little brown paper bag with his name written in Sharpie. He was 5, bright-eyed, gentle. He had this habit of whispering thank you like it was a secret between us, as if kindness was something sacred. That morning, I knocked on the door of my son Mark's house like I always did. The door opened, but it wasn't Sam who came running, and it wasn't Mark who greeted me. It was her. Rachel. She didn't smile, not even pretend to. She just stared at the bag in my hand and said flatly, "You're not welcome here anymore." I blinked. I thought maybe I'd misheard her. "I just came to drop off the muffins." "You're not seeing him anymore. You're confusing him. He asks for you every night and it's making things harder. You're not his parent, Eleanor. You need to step back." I froze. Something in me cracked. It was like a small sharp sound, the splintering of something fragile and old. "I don't understand," I whispered. "You don't need to," she replied. "And if you keep pushing, I'll make sure you never come near him again. Legally." Then she shut the door. Not slammed, just closed it like she was finished with a conversation that never truly began. I drove home with the muffins still in the passenger seat. I didn't cry, not at first. I remember pulling into my driveway and sitting in the car, hands on the wheel, the bag between us like a hostage I couldn't save. The world felt hollow, like I had just been made invisible, and worse, unnecessary. I didn't call Mark. Not that day. Not the day after either. I thought maybe he would call me, defend me, explain something. Tell me Rachel was overwhelmed or having a bad day or misunderstood. But the phone never rang. Instead, I waited. I waited for a week, then 2. I sent a message to Rachel. Just a simple one. "Can we talk? I'd like to understand what's changed." She read it. Never replied. I sent one to Mark. "I miss you. I miss Sam." No response. Days passed. Then weeks. Then his birthday came. Sam was turning 6. Every birthday since he was born, I had helped plan it. The decorations, the cake, even hand-sewn party favors for the kids when he turned 4 and wanted a woodland animal theme. But this year, no invitation, not even a photo. Just silence. So I drove to the park near their house, the one with the duck pond where they usually did his parties. I stayed in my car, watched from afar. I knew it was his birthday because I saw the balloon bouquet bright orange and green and Sam in a paper crown. He looked older, taller. His hair was longer, but his smile, that same soft, careful smile, was still his. And then he saw me, across the lawn, over a sea of balloons and folding chairs and 2 sweet juice boxes. Our eyes met. His face lit up. He started to run. "Grandma?" And then she caught him. "Rachel." She bent down and whispered something into his ear, holding him by the wrist. His shoulders slumped. He looked down at his feet. She turned and scanned the crowd. Saw me. Walked across the lawn like a woman on a mission. "Leave," she said before I could even roll my window down. "Please," I whispered. I just wanted to see him. I stayed away. I didn't even bring a gift. "You think this is sweet, sneaking around spying on your own grandchild? It's pathetic." "I love him," I said. "You're not his parent," she repeated. "And if I ever see you near him again without permission, I will file for a restraining order." Then she walked away. I watched her scoop him up like a prop, like a possession. And I sat there in my car, paralyzed, heart pounding, face burning. I hadn't done anything wrong. Had I? That night I couldn't sleep. I sat in my quiet kitchen with a mug of cold chamomile tea, staring at the wall, replaying it all over and over again. There were no fights, no screaming matches, no terrible incident that had caused this. Just a slow erosion, a quiet exile. She had always been cold to me, sure. Rachel was the kind of person who smiled with her teeth but never her eyes. But she used to be polite, tolerant, sometimes even friendly, until Sam turned 5 and started calling me his safe person. That's what did it. That's when the shift happened. That's when I started becoming a threat. I didn't know it yet, but that birthday party, that quiet heartbreak on a sunny afternoon, was the start of a very long war. Not a loud one. Not the kind with lawyers and slamming doors and accusations shouted in courtrooms, not yet. But the kind of war women fight all the time. The kind of war where love is used as leverage, where the ones who suffer are too small to understand what they've lost, where you are erased one visit, one text, one holiday at a time. And I knew then, sitting in my kitchen watching the moonlight stretch across the tile floor, I had two choices. I could disappear quietly, or I could fight, even if it meant standing alone, even if it meant being hated, even if it meant becoming something I never imagined I'd have to be. A grandmother who takes custody of her own grandchild. After that birthday, the air in my house changed. Silence stopped being peaceful. It became accusatory. Every corner seemed to whisper, "You weren't enough. You let them take him. You waited too long." I stopped baking for a while. There didn't seem to be a point. The muffins stayed in the freezer untouched like offerings for a child who no longer existed in my world. And the family group chat, it died. No messages from Mark, no updates, not even a thumbs up on the photo I posted of my garden coming back to life in spring. I was still alive, still a mother, still a grandmother. But in that thread of names and blue message bubbles, I no longer existed. Rachel didn't even remove me. She let me stay there silently excluded like a ghost watching her own funeral. At church, people started asking quiet questions. Is Sam doing well? We haven't seen you with him lately. Everything all right with Mark's family? I smiled too tightly. I lied with grace. Oh, they've just been busy with school. He's growing fast, you know how it is. We talk all the time. But it was all pretend. Because the truth was, I didn't know how Sam was. I didn't know what he was learning in school. I didn't know if he still slept with that plush turtle I gave him, or if it had already found its way to a donation bin. I started rereading old texts just to hear Mark's voice in my head. I'd raised him. I knew every expression, every quiet habit, how his ears turned red when he was holding something in, how he chewed his lower lip when nervous. And in my gut, I could feel something wasn't right. One morning, about 3 weeks after the park incident, I drove past their house on my way to the grocery store. It was innocent at first, just a glance, just a flicker of curiosity. But my eyes caught something. Sam's scooter. On the front lawn. Lying on its side. Its handlebar bent. It had been a birthday gift from me. One of the last. I slowed down, my stomach sank. Not because the scooter was broken. 'Cause it was raining, and no one had bothered to bring it inside. I went to therapy that same afternoon. A new therapist younger than me by decades with clear eyes and an honest voice. Her name was Jocelyn. She didn't nod politely or feed me platitudes. She looked at me. Fully. Like she was measuring how much of me had been buried under polite restraint. "I think I'm being erased," I told her. She didn't blink. Instead, she asked, "Do you want to be needed, or do you want to be seen?" I blinked back tears I didn't know were coming. "I want to matter," I said. She nodded slowly. "Then you're going to have to fight the stories someone else is writing for you." I left that session changed. Not charged up, not yet. But aware. Aware that what Rachel had done wasn't just cruel, it was strategic. It was erasure by emotional sterilization. She hadn't yelled at me, hadn't accused me of anything violent or obscene. She'd simply rewritten me as irrelevant, unnecessary, interfering. And worse, she'd fed that version of me to Mark. And he had swallowed it. I looked through my old messages. 2 years ago, he'd texted me this after a small family dinner. "Thanks for being such a calm space for Sam. I wish Rachel understood how important that is." That was before. Before Sam started calling me his safe person. Before Rachel began showing those small, tight smiles that didn't reach her eyes. Before the doors began to close. I screenshotted that message. Something about it felt important. Like a piece of evidence in a case I hadn't known I'd need to build. That night, I pulled out a journal. Not for feelings, I had enough of those. For facts. I wrote dates. Conversations. The day Rachel first denied me a visit. The way Sam looked at the park. The photos of the broken scooter. I wrote it all. I wasn't sure why yet. But something in me had shifted the same way a mother senses a fever in her child before the thermometer proves it. I didn't have a diagnosis. But I had a pattern. Then in early summer, I was walking to my car in the grocery store lot when I saw a familiar face. A younger woman. Light brown hair. glasses, holding a bag of cereal and some juice boxes. Ms. Whitmore, it took me a second. Then it clicked. Sam's old preschool teacher. Mara, I asked, shocked. She smiled a little too fast, a little too awkward. I wasn't sure if I should say anything, but I just wanted to say I think about Sam a lot. He was a sweet boy. Something about the way she said was twisted in my chest. I hesitated. How is he doing when you last saw him? She looked down at her bag, fidgeted. Well, it's not really my place anymore, but he was quieter than usual toward the end, more withdrawn, and sometimes he seemed a little scared to go home. She looked up, regret in her eyes. I probably shouldn't say more, but she already had. She touched my arm. Some kids need someone to speak for them, just in case. Then she walked away. That night, I sat in the dark and clutched my journal. That woman hadn't been dramatic. She hadn't made accusations. Just quiet concern. Just a nudge. But it was enough, because I wasn't imagining things. Rachel hadn't just stolen access to my grandson. She had slowly cut him off from every anchor of emotional safety in his life, and no one was watching. Except me. I was watching, and now I was recording. And I was done asking for permission to protect him. I didn't sleep the night after I saw Mara. I lay in bed, my fingers clutched around the soft spine of that journal, my mind running through every moment I had written down like they were exhibits in a courtroom. But no one else was in that courtroom yet. Not the lawyers, not the judge, not even Mark or Rachel. Just me and Sam. His small face, his hushed voice, the way he whispered safe, like it was a spell I had cast to keep monsters away. But I hadn't kept them away. Not this time. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in months. I baked again. Muffins like always. But I didn't wrap them in a brown bag with Sam's name on it. I kept them for myself. Because something about baking reminded me of the woman I used to be, the one Rachel was trying to erase. I needed that woman back. Because the next step wasn't going to be soft. I started small. I wrote an email to my lawyer, or rather to a lawyer. I hadn't needed one in decades. I didn't even know where to begin. I Googled family custody grandmother rights and fell into a rabbit hole of legal jargon, tears, and guilt. Most of what I found was discouraging. Biological grandparents have limited rights. Custody unlikely unless child is in imminent danger. But that wasn't the same as impossible. So I made an appointment. The law office was plain and unassuming, a low brick building near the courthouse, with cracked leather chairs and a woman behind the desk who looked like she'd seen more broken families than most pastors. The attorney's name was Meredith Clark. She was in her mid-40s, sharp-eyed but warm-spoken. I liked her instantly. I told her everything. The door slam, the birthday, the isolation, the bruise, the whisper from Mara. I showed her the screenshot of the message from Mark, the one where he'd called me Sam's calm space. She didn't say much for a while, just wrote in a quiet spiral on her legal pad. When I finished, I braced for the sigh. This is complicated. The grandparents don't usually win. But Meredith simply said, "You've been documenting." "Yes." She nodded. "You're already ahead of most." She explained the terrain. I wouldn't be able to file for full custody without a trigger, an incident, an investigation, something official. But I could petition for visitation rights, especially if I could argue that Sam was being emotionally harmed by my absence. It wouldn't be easy. And it wouldn't make Rachel happy. "She'll come at you hard," Meredith warned. "She'll say you're unwell, unstable, intrusive." I swallowed. "I've seen a therapist. Regularly." "That's good," Meredith said. "But they'll twist that if they can." "I'm not afraid." I lied. I was terrified. But I wasn't going to back down. Not this time. After the meeting, I went home and stood in Sam's old room, the guest room I used to make up like a magical kingdom every time he slept over. The glow-in-the-dark stars still clung to the ceiling. The books were still lined up on the shelf where the wild things are. The Gruffalo. The rabbit listened. My fingers ran over the spine of the last one. That one always made him cry. It was about a bunny who just listened, who didn't try to fix or change anything, who just stayed close. That was who I had been for Sam. His listener, his space. And now I had to become something else. His advocate. His protector. Even if it meant risking the relationship I still wanted to salvage with Mark. I sent Mark a message that night. Not an emotional one. Just a statement. I've hired an attorney. I'm seeking visitation through the courts. I don't want to hurt you. But I won't be erased. And I won't leave Sam without the stability he needs. He didn't reply. But I saw the read notification. And that was enough. Because silence from now on was going to mean complicity. The next 2 weeks were a blur of filings, paperwork notarizations, and emotional landmines. I gave Meredith copies of everything. My journal entries. Screenshots of text conversations. Photos from the park. And one day I brought her something else. The photograph of Sam's arm. The one with the small bruise near the elbow, dark, ugly, fresh. It wasn't proof of abuse, but it was proof that someone needed to be watching. Then came the letter. A formal response from Rachel's lawyer. A wall of language that essentially said Eleanor Whitmore is a controlling, delusional woman who has overstepped and caused emotional distress to her daughter-in-law and grandson. They were requesting the court deny any visitation. They attached statements. One from Mark. It nearly destroyed me. He said I had become invasive, that I overstepped boundaries, that my presence created emotional confusion for Sam, my son, the boy I raised, had painted me as a danger. I didn't cry when I read it. I sat in Meredith's office staring at the printed words like they belonged to a stranger. I'm sorry, she said gently. This is tactical. Don't take it personally. But I did. Because how could I not? I had swaddled Mark. Held him through croup broken hearts, even his first panic attack at 19. I taught him how to ride a bike. And now he had signed off on a character assassination. But Meredith wasn't rattled. This is a reaction. We expected this. What matters now is the hearing. The court wants to know what's best for Sam. That phrase echoed in my head. Best for Sam. Not best for Mark. Not best for Rachel. Not easiest for the court. Best for the boy. And I knew what that looked like. Because I had seen it in his eyes every time he ran into my arms. Because I had heard it in the way he whispered safe. Because I was the one who had taught him what love without conditions felt like. That weekend, I went to the park again. I didn't go near their house. I just sat on the bench near the pond pretending to feed ducks. And I watched. Not for them. For other children. For other families. And all I could think was how many of these people are pretending too. How many grandmothers are sitting in parked cars watching birthday parties they weren't invited to? How many are holding back love because they've been told they're too much, too emotional, too involved, too inconvenient? I wasn't going to be quiet anymore. And if I had to fight this battle in court, I would do it with everything I had left. Because someone needed to show Sam that you don't run from people you love. You fight for them, even if it means you lose something else along the way. When I returned to Jocelyn, my therapist, I wasn't the same woman who had first walked into her office clutching silence like a second skin. I had turned a corner, not toward peace, not yet, but toward clarity. I told her, sitting down slowly. They're fighting me. Mark said I cause emotional confusion. Jocelyn didn't flinch. She just studied me like a map she'd already begun to understand. How does that land with you? She asked. It cuts, I admitted. But it also makes me wonder, is that the story they've been telling Sam too? That I'm the chaos? She tilted her head gently. People who rely on control often create narratives where anyone who disrupts their dominance becomes a threat. Even kindness can be painted as chaos when it isn't theirs to direct. I sat with that for a moment. So Rachel wasn't just cutting me out to hurt me, she was crafting a reality in which I was the problem. The intrusive grandma. The clingy old woman who couldn't let go. Jocelyn leaned forward slightly. What scares you more, that Sam might believe her? Or that Mark already does? The question cracked something inside me. I let out a long, tired breath. I think Mark already does, I said. And that breaks me. Because I raised him better than this. I wasn't naive. I'd seen the shift in Mark over the years. It hadn't been sudden. It was like watching ivy climb a brick wall, slow, quiet, and all-consuming. He'd stopped calling as much. He started deferring more to Rachel, even in small things, where to spend Christmas, whether Sam could sleep over. And somewhere along the way, his eyes began to glaze when I spoke. It was as if my words passed through him like wind. But worse than the distance was the hollow in him. The boy I raised used to have such a deep, searching soul. But now he repeated things Rachel said like they were gospel. And when I told Jocelyn this, she gave me a phrase I will never forget. Coerced passivity. It's common in emotionally imbalanced partnerships, she explained. Sometimes the dominant partner doesn't even need to raise their voice. They just condition their partner to believe that resistance isn't worth the cost. Mark wasn't evil. He wasn't cruel. But he was conditioned. Maybe even broken in ways I didn't fully understand yet. And that realization hurt just as much as losing Sam. Because I hadn't just lost my grandson, I had lost my son. And the woman who took them both didn't need to raise a hand. She simply rewrote reality. The court date loomed closer. Meredith prepped me daily. We gathered more statements. Quietly reached out to people who had observed Sam's behavior. I gave them contact info for Mara, the preschool teacher. And I gave them my therapist's number. I wanted my mental health on the table. I had nothing to hide. If they wanted to use my therapy records against me, let them. I had gone to therapy to become stronger, not to bury skeletons. One day, while sorting documents, I found a letter. It was from Sam back when he'd just started learning to write. The crooked letters, the uneven spacing. Dear Grandma, I love your muffins and you. You are my favorite soft place. Don't stop hugs. I pressed that letter to my chest and sobbed. Not just from grief, from conviction. Because that little boy still lived inside him. He might be scared, he might be silenced, but he hadn't forgotten, and neither had I. Rachel made her first big move the next week. She requested that my supervised visit be revoked due to emotional disturbance. She claimed I had made Sam anxious during our last meeting at the court center, that I had interrogated him. But I had done nothing of the sort. I had simply held his hand and whispered, "I miss you." He had nodded, looked down, and whispered, "Me too." That was all. That was enough for her to panic. Meredith fought the motion. She filed a counterclaim asserting that limiting contact entirely without justification was parental alienation. A serious accusation, but one we could begin to prove. Because Sam hadn't just been isolated from me. He'd stopped attending his favorite extracurriculars. He wasn't seeing other kids regularly. He'd been pulled from his original preschool, the one Mara had worked at, for no clear reason. Rachel was isolating him. Not just from me. From the world. I started preparing a statement to read in court. It wasn't legal strategy. It wasn't emotionless. It was simply the truth. I wrote, "I'm not here because I want to relive my glory days of parenting. I'm not here because I'm lonely or bitter or unwilling to let go. I'm here because I love a child who used to call me his safe place. And I am terrified of who he might become without that place in his life. I have nothing to gain but his well-being. And everything to lose if I don't fight." Jocelyn read the statement before I submitted it. She nodded slowly. "You're not waging war. You're holding a boundary. And sometimes that looks like battle to people who benefit from your silence." Her words became my armor. Because what I had once called grief was starting to turn into something stronger. Conviction. Mark still hadn't replied to my message. Not even a single word. But the silence no longer confused me. It defined the walls Rachel had built around him. But Sam wasn't walled off yet. There was still a window, still a way to reach him. I had to believe that. Because love that goes unanswered is painful. But love that's cut off, that's a wound that festers in children and adults alike. I stood in front of the mirror before bed that night and saw something new in my reflection. Lines etched deeper from stress, sure, but also a certain calm behind the eyes. The calm that comes from knowing you've chosen the right side of the story, even if no one claps for you at the end. Because sometimes doing the right thing doesn't look heroic. It looks quiet, lonely, resisted, but still worth it. If I've learned anything through this battle, it's that instincts are often right, but instincts without evidence are easy to dismiss. So I stopped relying on my memory alone. Every visit, every reaction, every phone call, I documented it all. I turned my journal into a timeline. Dates, words, photos, tone of voice, changes in behavior. Because I realized something: I wasn't just a grandmother anymore. I was a witness. to something that others didn't want to see or were too afraid to name. And this time I wasn't going to be dismissed with words like overbearing or dramatic. I was going to prove that Sam needed me, not for my sake, but for his. The next supervised visit was scheduled for a Wednesday afternoon at the court-ordered family center. A cold room with plastic chairs and padded corners on the walls, more functional than welcoming. I arrived early, heart hammering, hands sweating. I had no idea how Sam would act, if he'd retreat, if he'd talk, if Rachel had already filled his head with more poisoned narratives. But when he walked in, something in me stilled. His eyes found mine immediately, and even though he didn't smile, he looked at me. That was something. A flicker of recognition. A tether. The supervisor, a woman named Dana, gave me a polite but professional nod and sat in the corner with a clipboard. Sam sat across from me, legs swinging, eyes darting. I didn't reach for him. I waited. "Hi, sweetheart," I said gently. "I'm so happy to see you." He didn't respond right away. Then, "Hi, Grandma." Quiet, flat, but not cold. Just unsure. We played with some blocks. I let him lead. I asked simple questions, nothing heavy, nothing probing, until he placed a green triangle on top of a blue square and said, "This is the tower where I hide." My breath caught. I kept my voice steady. "You hide in a tower?" He nodded. "It's in my room. Not a real one, but in my head." Dana scribbled something. I didn't push. I simply asked, "What does the tower keep you safe from?" He looked at me, then truly looked, and whispered, "Yelling." The visit ended before I could ask more. But that word stayed with me. Yelling. From whom? Rachel Mark. I didn't know. But a child doesn't invent emotional isolation unless they've felt it. I wrote everything down that evening, word for word. I filed it in the binder Meredith had given me labeled Observations Visit 3. It wasn't a smoking gun, but it was another thread in the web Rachel had spun, and I was beginning to untangle it. Later that week, while reviewing old photos on my laptop, I found something I had completely forgotten. A video from a Thanksgiving 3 years ago before Rachel tightened the noose around family dynamics. We were all in the kitchen. Sam was helping me stir pumpkin batter. Mark filmed us. Rachel was in the background on her phone, half interested. And in the video, Sam turns to me and says clearly, brightly, "When I grow up, I want to live with you." Rachel's head snaps up. Her mouth tightens. The video ends a few seconds later abruptly. Cut off. Like a signal. I showed the video to Meredith. She watched it twice. "This is useful," she said. "It demonstrates emotional connection, bond, natural attachment." And it was before the isolation began. "Do you think the court will see it that way?" She didn't answer right away. "Then if they don't, we'll make them." But I didn't stop there. That visit with Sam, his little comment about the tower, it kept echoing in my head. So I bought a children's book about emotional safety, a gentle one with animals who learn how to talk about feelings. I brought it to the next visit. "Can I read to you today?" I asked him. He nodded. He didn't lean in, but he didn't pull away. And when I reached the page where the little fox says, "Sometimes the loud makes my tummy hurt," Sam tapped the picture. "That part's real," he whispered. Dana scribbled again, and I felt it, the shift. Something about Sam's body language, his truth, the way he seemed to speak without knowing how powerful his words were. It was revealing, not just to me, but to the system meant to protect him. At the end of that visit, Sam did something that broke me open. He leaned close and whispered, "Can I come to your house next time?" I froze, because the answer was no. Legally, I couldn't say yes. But I smiled gently. "I want that too, sweetheart. One day. I promise." And then he did something even more unexpected. He hugged me, right there in front of Dana. Tight, fierce. A hug that said, "I remember, I miss, I trust." Dana looked up. We locked eyes. And in that split-second glance, I knew she saw it too. That hug became part of my report. Meredith filed it under emotional reciprocity. The court doesn't care about sentiment, but they care about patterns. And now I had them. Visit after visit. Word after word. Whispers of fear. Echoes of isolation. Fragments of love clawing their way through silence. Jocelyn called it narrative reclamation. "You're helping Sam rewrite the story he's been given," she said. "Children adapt to survive. But when given the chance, they reach for the truth." And I was going to give him that chance, no matter how long it took, no matter how ugly it got, because I wasn't just reclaiming my place in Sam's life. I was protecting the part of him that still remembered who I used to be and who he was when he was with me. It was a Tuesday morning when the call came, the kind of call that doesn't just change your day, but shifts the entire weight of your truth. I was rinsing dishes when my phone buzzed, and for a moment I considered ignoring it. But something in my chest stirred. The number was unfamiliar. I answered. "Mrs. Whitmore," the voice said. "My name's Kayla Jennings. I used to work with Rachel. I hope it's okay that I'm calling you directly." My body stiffened. I set the plate down. "I'm sorry you worked with Rachel." "Yes. At the law office downtown. About 4 years ago. I'm not there anymore." Something in her tone carried urgency and unease. "I saw what's happening in the custody case. I didn't know how else to reach you, but I think there's something you should know." We agreed to meet in person, a quiet cafe outside the city, neutral ground, public but intimate. Kayla arrived in a navy peacoat, her hair pulled back. Nervousness etched into her every movement. She wasn't much older than Mark, maybe early 40s, but her eyes had the weight of someone who had carried a secret too long. We ordered coffee, sat in a corner booth, and after a moment of hesitation, she opened her purse and pulled out a folder. Inside, handwritten notes, old work emails, and what looked like screenshots. "I couldn't take it anymore," she said. "Back then, I thought it was just ambition. Rachel was calculated, strategic. She liked to win." I nodded slowly. "That sounds like her." Kayla looked at me hard. "No. I don't think you understand. Rachel enjoyed control. She didn't just argue cases. She manipulated people, colleagues, clients, even her own boss. And she got away with it because she was so polished. Polished. That was the word I'd always struggled with. Rachel never raised her voice. She never slammed doors or cursed. But her silence could suffocate you. Her smile could slice." Kayla continued. "I started noticing patterns, especially with clients who were filing for custody. Rachel would advise them in ways that didn't feel ethical. She told one woman to strategically isolate the child from the grandparents to avoid messy testimonies. Another time, she coached a client on how to provoke their ex during visitation so they'd look unstable in court." My mouth went dry. Kayla pushed a paper toward me, a printed email. It was from Rachel to a client dated 3 years ago. "Grandparent attachment can become a liability. Suggest limiting access softly at first. Frame it as emotional disruption, even if it isn't. Courts prefer quiet households." My hands trembled as I held the paper. "Why are you giving me this now?" I asked. Kayla hesitated. "I saw Sam once," she said. "At a park near Rachel's condo. He looked small, guarded. And I remembered how you used to drop in sometimes at the office. The way his face would light up when you came. I wasn't supposed to know," she added, "but I figured it out." And then she said the words that cracked me open. "I think she's doing to him what she did to her clients. But this time, he's the strategy." I drove home in silence, hands gripping the steering wheel, Kayla's words playing on a loop in my head. He's the strategy. Not the son, not the boy, not the human being with needs and fear and tenderness. Just a pawn, a tool. And I had been right all along. That evening, I met Meredith at her office. I laid Kayla's folder on the desk and took a deep breath. "She's willing to testify," I said. Meredith skimmed the papers, and for the first time in weeks, her face changed. Not calm, not cautious, but quietly fierce. This, she said, could change everything. Of course, Rachel's lawyers filed a motion to dismiss Kayla as an unreliable third party. They called her disgruntled, vindictive, but Meredith expected that. She prepared a counter motion, a character witness statement, and more importantly, a timeline. Because Kayla's testimony didn't just paint a picture of Rachel's past behavior. It aligned perfectly with what was happening to me now. Same language, same tactics, same cold detachment disguised as maternal protection. The next visit with Sam was different. He seemed more withdrawn. Not colder, just watchful, like he knew something was shifting around him. I brought a coloring book. He chose the page with a treehouse. As he colored the latter in brown crayon, he whispered, "Trees don't tell secrets." I paused. "Is that something someone told you?" He shrugged. "Trees are quiet. Grandma talks too much." A quiet dagger in my chest, but I didn't flinch. Instead, I said, "That's okay. You don't have to tell me anything. I'm just glad to be here." He kept coloring, but a few minutes later he slid the page across the table to me. At the top, in uneven letters, he had written, "My safe tree." That night, I added the page to my binder. Page 92. A treehouse. A whisper. A reminder that, even when he repeated Rachel's narratives, a part of him still reached for me, still believed, still remembered. Jocelyn called that emotional imprinting. Children can be conditioned to repeat adult scripts, she said. But the body keeps score. The heart doesn't forget. That's what Rachel didn't understand. You can build a wall around a child, but love seeps in through the cracks. I couldn't sleep that night, so I pulled out all my journals, all the reports, all the photographs, and I began to draft my testimony. Not for court. For him. A letter. To Sam. To be read one day when he's older. When he understands. I wrote, "I didn't fight because I hated your parents. I fought because you were my home. And no one should ever be told they can't go home again." Mark didn't answer the first 2 messages I sent him. Or the third. But on the fourth, the one I almost didn't send, he replied, "Let's meet. Just us. Saturday. 10 a.m. Eastbrook Cafe." No emojis. No warm punctuation. Just a plain wall of text that felt like both an offering and a warning. I stared at the screen for a long time. He hadn't spoken to me alone in months. Was this a trap? Or was it a crack? I didn't care. I said yes. Because if there was even a shred of the son I'd raised left in him, I needed to look into his eyes and ask him why. Why he'd let her erase me. Why he stood by while Sam's world shrank. Why he didn't fight. The cafe was quiet, dimly lit, still smelling of cinnamon rolls and burnt espresso. He was already there, sitting in the far corner by the window, staring into a black coffee he hadn't touched. He looked tired, not the exhausted kind that comes from work or sleepless nights. The kind that comes from carrying something too long. I approached slowly. "Hi, Mark." He looked up, blinked, then gave a hollow smile. "Mom." We didn't hug. We didn't small talk. He gestured for me to sit. I did. For a long moment, neither of us said a word. Then quietly, I asked the question that had rotted in my heart for nearly a year. "Why did you let her cut me out?" He inhaled slowly, then looked out the window as if the answer might be hiding in the clouds. "I didn't mean for it to go that far," he said. "That far," I echoed. "Mark, she made it illegal for me to see my grandson." He flinched. I know. But Rachel, she gets upset easily. And when she's upset, everything spirals." I leaned forward. "So you appeased her. You let her dictate everything." He didn't respond. Instead, he ran a hand through his hair, then said, "Do you remember the miscarriage?" I froze. He'd never brought it up before. Rachel had miscarried early in their marriage. It had been devastating. "Yes," I said softly. "She blamed herself," he continued. "But she started blaming everyone. The stress, the pressure. Even you sometimes." I blinked. "Me." She said you hovered. That your expectations made her feel like she wasn't good enough. I sat back stunned. I tried to shut it down, but Rachel, when she believes something, she doesn't let it go. And then he said something I never expected to hear. She told me, if I didn't start at choosing sides, she'd leave. Take Sam. Disappear. My stomach twisted. "She threatened you." He nodded, eyes glossy. Not directly, but she hinted. She said I was either with her or I was against the stability of our family. The manipulation was so familiar, the strategic language, the performance of concern wrapped around cold control. It all made sense. "She was using your fear against you," I whispered. "She is his mother," he said defensively, then immediately winced like even he didn't believe it fully. I exhaled. "And I'm your mother. And Sam's grandmother." But that didn't stop you from leaving me out in the cold. Mark looked down at his hands. I didn't know what to do. You let her redefine me, I said, voice tightening. You knew what I was to Sam. You saw it. You even thanked me once for being his calm space. His eyes flicked up. Guilty. I found the message, I said. I kept it. Silence again. I let it stretch. Then, do you believe him when he says he's afraid to go home? That landed. Mark swallowed, hard. Sometimes he whispered. But then Rachel tells me he's just sensitive. That he gets overwhelmed by too many people, too much noise. And you believe her. I don't know what to believe anymore. I stared at him. The man who used to come home with scraped knees, who cried when his pet hamster died, who once saved a baby bird and fed it with an eyedropper for 2 weeks. Where had that boy gone? He's still in there, I said quietly. Mark looked confused. Who? You. The boy who knew how to care. The one who felt everything. He blinked, hard. And I saw it, the flicker. The fracture in the armor. I'm scared, he admitted. Of her. He hesitated. Then quietly, yes. My heart broke. But I didn't reach for him. Instead I said, then do something brave, for Sam. I didn't ask him to testify. Not yet. I just let the silence settle between us one more time. As I got up to leave, I said, when you're ready to stop surviving and start protecting, you know where to find me. And I walked out. That night I wrote in my journal, Mark is not lost. He is buried beneath a lifetime of appeasement. But I saw him today, briefly, and I know if I can reach him, Sam might have both of us again. Rachel never reacted impulsively. That was her specialty. She didn't scream, didn't throw things, didn't raise her voice in courtrooms or kitchens. She weaponized calm like it was a sword sheathed in ice. So when Meredith called me and said she's countersuing, I didn't panic. I braced for what I asked, holding the phone tightly. Defamation and emotional harassment. Meredith replied, her voice steady but tense. She claims your supervised visits are re-traumatizing Sam and that you're manipulating him to turn against her. I sat down stunned. But I've done everything right. I haven't said a word about her to him. I believe you, but that doesn't matter right now. What matters is that she's scared. And scared people fight dirty. It felt like whiplash. One moment I was hopeful after my meeting with Mark. The next I was accused of psychological abuse for loving my grandson. The court issued a temporary pause on our visits until the hearing on the countersuit. I wasn't even allowed to say goodbye. Sam would show up one day for his scheduled time and find me gone. No warning, no explanation. And that was the true cruelty. Not to me but to him. Because Rachel knew exactly what message that would send. That I had disappeared again. That love couldn't be trusted. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw something across the room and let every suppressed fury I'd ever felt explode. But instead, I sat down at the kitchen table, and I wrote another letter. To Sam. I wouldn't send it, not now. Maybe not for years. But I needed it out of my body. I didn't leave you. I didn't vanish. I was told I couldn't come. But I never stopped loving you, not for 1 second. I'm still fighting. Even if you can't see it yet. Jocelyn called the next day, having heard the news. Do you want to come in? She asked. I'm scared I'll just cry the whole time, I whispered. Then we'll cry. That's what it's for. So I went. And for once, I didn't try to appear strong. I sat on her couch and wept for the pause in visits, for Sam's confusion, for the terrifying possibility that I might lose him for good. I feel like I'm screaming into a soundproof room, I said, voice shaking. And no one's listening. She nodded slowly. But screaming still matters. Even if no one hears you today, the echoes carry. Meanwhile, Meredith worked like a storm. She filed a motion to dismiss the countersuit as retaliatory. She dug into Rachel's financials, her legal career, her past cases. She began constructing a pattern, a trail of subtle but undeniable control. And she subpoenaed Dana, the court supervisor, who had witnessed the sessions with Sam. Dana had taken her own notes, detailed, clinical, emotionless. But they painted a picture of a child reaching, of a grandmother gently responding, of a bond that couldn't be broken without cost. Then one day an email arrived that changed everything. It was from Mark. She went through my phone, found out about our meeting, She's furious. But I've made a decision. I'm willing to testify. I stared at the screen for a long time. The boy I had raised, the one with the trembling hands and soft heart, was standing up. He was choosing. Meredith scheduled a prep call with him the next day. I didn't hear what they discussed. I wasn't allowed to. But when it ended, she called me. He's nervous, she said. But he's credible. He's scared of her, yes. But he knows what he saw. And what he allowed. That's powerful. What did he say? I asked quietly. She paused. He said Sam needs you. And he's sorry for not protecting you sooner. My throat closed. Because I didn't want revenge. I didn't even want Rachel to suffer. I just wanted restoration. A return. To something that once felt whole. But of course Rachel didn't go down without a final twist. The day before the hearing, I received a letter from her attorney. In it, she offered a settlement. If you agree to drop the case, it read you will be permitted to visit Sam twice a year on Rachel's terms. No court. No testimony. No more legal drama. It was a bribe. A trap wrapped in compromise. Meredith asked, "Do you want to consider it?" I thought of Sam's hug. His coloring page. His whispered fears. His treehouse drawing with the words, "My safe tree." And I said no. I want this heard in court. I want truth on the record. The next morning, I stood in front of the courthouse. Sky gray above, wind bitter. I wore my best navy suit. The one from my son's wedding. The one Rachel had complimented back then before she turned cold. Funny how full circle this all was. Inside I saw Mark. He looked pale but resolute. We didn't speak. We just nodded. That was enough. Meredith handed me my written testimony and I folded it into my hand like it was sacred scripture. And then we walked in. Not as enemies, not as broken people, but as witnesses to the truth that had been silenced too long. The courtroom was colder than I expected. Not in temperature, in tone. Everything about it felt sterile, deliberate. The cream-colored walls, the polished wood, the quiet shuffle of papers and shoes and tension. But the tension wasn't in the space, it was inside me. I had waited for this moment for nearly a year. And now that I was seated behind my attorney staring at the back of Rachel's head, I felt like I might disappear. Not from fear, from sheer overwhelming weight. The judge was a woman, stern, efficient, the kind of face that revealed nothing and heard everything. She called the hearing to order, and suddenly, the courtroom belonged to protocol and evidence. Not grief, not longing, not love. Meredith leaned close and whispered, "Remember calm, factual, but don't hide the emotion. Let them see your humanity. It matters." Then she stood. "Your Honor, we'd like to call Eleanor Whitmore to the stand." I rose slowly. My knees didn't want to cooperate, but my spine did. I walked to the witness chair with every ounce of strength I could muster and sat down. I looked at the judge, not at Rachel. The bailiff swore me in. And then Meredith began. "Mrs. Whitmore," she said, "can you describe the nature of your relationship with your grandson, Samuel Whitmore?" I nodded. From the moment he was born, we were connected. I helped raise him while his parents worked. I was there for his first steps, his first words. We shared meals, bedtime stories, everything. "Would you say your bond was strong?" I hesitated. "Then it was sacred." Meredith gave the slightest smile. "Can you describe when and how that relationship changed?" I took a slow breath. After a disagreement with my daughter-in-law Rachel, I was suddenly cut off from Sam. No explanation, no warning, just gone. And when I tried to reach out, I was told it was confusing for him to have me involved. Did you believe that was true? No, because Sam was never confused when he was with me. He was safe, grounded. Meredith nodded and then shifted. "Can you tell the court what you observed during your supervised visits?" I spoke carefully but clearly. Sam was hesitant at first. Withdrawn. Like he didn't know if he was allowed to trust me. But over time he began to open up. He remembered songs we sang, games we played. He whispered things, quiet truths, that he felt afraid at home, that he hid in a tower in his mind. There was a murmur from the audience. The judge glanced up. I continued steady. I never asked him to choose. I never criticized his parents. I only listened. because he needed someone who would hear what he wasn't saying out loud. Meredith approached with a document. This, she said, is a drawing Sam made during one of those visits. She handed it to the clerk who gave it to the judge. I didn't need to look at it. I remembered every line. The treehouse. The words, "my safe tree." He told me trees don't tell secrets, I added. I think he was trying to say he didn't feel safe speaking at home. Rachel's lawyer objected speculation, but the judge allowed it. Proceed, she said. Meredith stepped back. No further questions at this time. Then came cross-examination. Rachel's lawyer was sharp, young, and deeply rehearsed. She rose with the posture of someone used to being obeyed. Mrs. Whitmore, she began. Isn't it true that you had several prior disagreements with your daughter-in-law before access to your grandson was restricted? Yes, I said calmly, but disagreements don't erase love. Would you describe yourself as a persistent presence in your son's household? I lifted my chin. I was a consistent caregiver. That's different. She smiled tight, cold. Did you ever question Rachel's parenting out loud in front of others? I asked questions when I had concerns. So you did undermine her authority. I tried to advocate for Sam. She paced. You claim Rachel erased you. But isn't it possible she was protecting her son from emotional confusion, from a grandparent who struggled with boundaries? That one stung, but I didn't flinch. No, she was protecting herself from my presence, not Sam. And what proof do you have of that? Sam, I said, voice firm. He is my proof. When I stepped down, my hands were shaking, but my spine was straight. And then it was Mark's turn. He walked slowly to the stand. Rachel's eyes were on him like laser points. He didn't look back. He was sworn in. Meredith asked him to describe the change in Rachel's behavior over the last 3 years. And he did. Quietly, carefully, but truthfully. He admitted to being manipulated. He confessed to being afraid. He acknowledged that Sam had changed, become quieter, more anxious, and more attached to silence than to people. Then Meredith asked the hardest question. Why didn't you intervene sooner? Mark's voice broke. Because I didn't want to lose my family, but in trying to keep the peace, I lost it anyway. There were no cheers, no gasps, just silence. That heavy, reverent silence that comes when something real has been said. The judge thanked him. He stepped down. He walked past Rachel. She didn't move, didn't blink. But her posture changed the slightest lean away from him, like he was no longer part of her strategy. The day ended with Rachel herself refusing to testify. Her lawyer said it would serve no constructive purpose. But the judge raised an eyebrow. I find it unusual, she said, that the central figure in this conflict has no desire to clarify her own behavior. Rachel only nodded. Polite, cold. But I saw it. The fracture, because for the first time she wasn't controlling the narrative. The room had seen her, and they had heard me. When we left the courthouse, I stood on the steps and looked at the sky. It wasn't over, but something had shifted. The tide, the air, the weight. Sam's voice still rang in my ears. Can I come to your house next time? Maybe soon. The court decision wasn't immediate. We waited. 2 weeks. 14 days of quiet torture where every sound, a phone call, a knock at the door, made my stomach twist. Meredith said the judge was being thorough, that it was a good sign that she was considering long-term impact. But the mother in me wasn't reassured by legal optimism. I thought of Sam every night where he was sleeping, whether he was safe, whether he still colored tree houses when no one was looking, whether he still remembered me. And then, on the 15th morning, the envelope arrived. I stood at the mailbox holding it in both hands, afraid to breathe. I didn't open it there. I took it inside, sat at the kitchen table, and prayed. Not for revenge. Not for Rachel's downfall. Just for truth to be honored. For the bond between a child and a grandparent to be seen. The document was short. 6 pages. Dense language, formal phrasing, the kind of prose that cloaks life-altering decisions in legal neutrality. But then my eyes caught the sentence. Temporary sole physical custody of Samuel Whitmore will be granted to Eleanor Whitmore, pending formal custodial evaluation and therapist's recommendation. I stopped breathing. I read it again. Granted to Eleanor Whitmore. My name, in black and white. Holding the future of a child I loved more than air. I dropped the papers, and I sobbed. No restraint, no composure. My body shook as every buried hope clawed its way out from under the grief I had stored like dust in my bones. Because the court had seen it. They had believed me. Not just me, him too. They had believed Sam. His coloring, his silence, his whispers. And they had believed Mark. Maybe even just a little they had believed that love could endure even after erasure. The next few days were a flurry of logistics, therapist approvals, home assessments, court-assigned visitation support, and then the handoff. It wasn't like a movie. There was no dramatic door slam, no screaming match in a parking lot. Just a gray morning, a neutral meeting place, and a boy, my boy, stepping out of the car holding a stuffed dinosaur and a too small backpack. He looked thinner than I remembered, but his eyes, they were still brown, still curious, still waiting. He saw me, paused, then walked forward. I knelt. "Hi, sweetheart." He didn't smile, but he didn't look away either. He whispered, "Is this real?" I nodded, throat closing. Yes, just us now. Mark was there too, standing behind Rachel's car. He didn't approach, but he nodded. And I nodded back. It wasn't a surrender. It was a truce. One built on what mattered most, Sam. The first week was delicate. Sam didn't talk much. He'd eat only one kind of cereal, refused to sleep in his room, and insisted on having every light in the hallway on at night. I didn't question it. I didn't fix it. I just held the space. I read books near him without asking him to listen. I hummed songs while folding laundry, letting the melody fill the room. I cooked his favorite pasta, the one he used to help me stir. At first he just poked at it. But then on the fourth night he said, "You didn't burn it this time." I laughed. He cracked a smile. It was small, but it was a beginning. That weekend we built a fort in the living room. Pillows, blankets, flashlights, old stuffed animals. Inside he whispered, "I missed this." And I whispered back, "Me too." Then he leaned his head on my shoulder and fell asleep, like he knew the storm had passed. Rachel didn't go quietly. She appealed the temporary order within the month. Her legal team filed for shared custody, citing emotional bias, grandparent overreach, and lack of structural routine. But this time, the judge called for psychological evaluations, not of me, but of Sam, an independent child therapist, who met with him, observed us, read the journals I'd kept, the drawings he made, and wrote in her final report. The child exhibits a heightened sense of emotional safety and increased verbalization in the presence of Ms. Whitmore. He references her home as a quiet place and initiates physical affection. Indicators suggest trauma symptoms have reduced since the change in living environment. That report was read aloud in the courtroom. Rachel didn't speak. Her eyes were stone, but I saw her hands trembling, not with rage, but with realization. She had lost not to me, but to truth. The judge made it final that spring. I was awarded permanent legal custody. Mark was granted consistent visitation. Rachel supervised contact contingent on therapy. And Sam, he got his treehouse. We built it in the backyard that summer. Not high, just enough for a view. He painted the walls light blue, hung up wind chimes. Inside he taped his drawings. One of them, the very first, had the words changed. It now said, "My safe tree with Grandma." The court order didn't change everything. It changed the structure, yes, the legal parameters, the routines, the obligations. But emotionally, the knots inside us remained. Victory doesn't untie trauma. It gives you a pair of scissors and dares you to learn how to use them gently. Sam started sleeping in his own bed again in late June. I didn't ask him why. I just noticed one night as I passed his room that he was curled beneath the covers, the light off his breathing soft and even. The dinosaur was still there, tucked under one arm, but the hallway lights, he didn't need them anymore, and neither did I. We found a rhythm. Breakfast was quiet, unhurried. School drop-offs were routine. A lunchbox, a hug, a whispered, "You got this." We had Taco Tuesdays, Friday puzzles, Saturday park walks. And in between those simple things, he bloomed. Slowly, like spring under frost. He started singing again in the car, in the shower, under his breath while drawing. Sometimes he asked questions that broke my heart. "Why did Mom say I couldn't see you? Why didn't Dad stop her sooner? Will I have to leave again?" I never lied. But I also never gave him more pain than he could carry. I don't know why she did that, I'd say, but I know it wasn't your fault. And your dad made mistakes. But he's trying to be better now. And most of all, you're safe here. Always. Mark visited every other weekend. He was trying, I saw that. He brought board games, books, even a telescope once. Sam was hesitant at first, but eventually he began to lean back toward him. Not fully, not with trust, but with curiosity. It was a beginning. And beginnings deserve a chance. Rachel was quieter. She showed up for her supervised visits dressed impeccably, spoke politely, brought store-bought crafts and pre-written letters. Sam stayed stiff around her, answering questions, accepting hugs, but never initiating anything. Once he came home from a session and said, "She talks to me like a robot." I didn't respond. Not because I didn't have thoughts, I had too many, but because I knew Sam didn't need commentary. He needed space. He needed me to be the one adult who didn't turn every moment into a lesson. One afternoon, Mark and I sat on the back porch. Sam was inside drawing something with sidewalk chalk across the patio. Mark cleared his throat. "I'm sorry, Mom." The words floated awkwardly between us. He wasn't good at this, apologizing, owning things. But I wasn't asking for eloquence, just truth. So I said thank you. He stared out at Sam. I thought I was protecting him. By staying. By keeping the peace. "You were protecting yourself," I said softly. From the fallout of standing up to her. He didn't deny it. He just nodded. "Do you think she ever loved him?" he asked. I looked at him sharply. Because that question carried decades of doubt. Of history. "Rachel loves control," I said carefully. "And I think she believes that's love. But Sam needs more than belief. He needs presence, patience, safety." Mark looked like he might cry, but he didn't. Instead, he whispered, "I want to do better." And I believed him, because for the first time I saw not the boy I raised, but a man trying to become. That night, Sam asked if he could sleep in the treehouse. I said yes on one condition: I'd sleep in a chair right beneath it. Just in case. We brought out pillows, blankets, a flashlight, and a thermos of cocoa. As he climbed the wooden ladder, he said, "You know what I want to be when I grow up?" I smiled. "What?" "A grandparent." The breath caught in my throat. "Why?" "Because grandparents don't give up." I sat in the dark, wrapped in a sweater, tears rolling silently down my cheeks. And I knew. All the court hearings, all the therapy, all the loneliness, all the pain. It had been worth it. Because somewhere along the way, I had taught him not just how to survive, but how to love back. I thought the storm had passed. The court battles were behind us. The legal paperwork filed away like old wounds. But Rachel never understood the meaning of closure. She never believed peace was possible without control. One evening, about 6 months after Sam had settled into our home, the phone rang. It was a call that pierced the fragile calm I'd built. Her voice was cold-clipped, rehearsed. "Eleanor," she said, "I'm calling because you're crossing lines." I clenched the receiver. "What lines?" I asked. "Boundaries," she replied. "Sam's boundaries, his privacy." I fought the urge to laugh. "Please," I said slowly, "I'm the one who fought to give him a home. I'm the one who fought for his safety." "What boundaries are you talking about?" There was a pause. Then, "You're undermining my parenting. You're teaching him to mistrust me. If you continue, I will take legal action." It was the same pattern. The same script. Her weaponized calm trying to rewrite reality. But this time I wasn't silent. I replied, "Sam has a right to safety, and I have a right to protect him. If that makes you uncomfortable, maybe you need to ask why." She hung up. That night, I sat beside Sam's bed. He was scared again, nightmares returning. He whispered, "Mommy's angry." I held him tight. Sometimes people are angry because they're afraid. But I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere. He nodded, eyes heavy. "I love you, Grandma." The next day, Meredith and I met to discuss the new threat. We expected Rachel to push back, Meredith said. But this feels different. Legal action. Yes. She's preparing a motion to modify custody, citing parental alienation and emotional harm. I swallowed hard. It's like she won't stop. But the judge didn't allow the motion to proceed immediately. Instead, she ordered an independent psychological evaluation for Sam and for Rachel. The evaluators were kind but firm. They spent hours with Sam watching his play, listening to his words, noting his fears. With Rachel, they sought to understand her behavior and motivations. When the report came back, it was clear. Rachel was struggling. Emotionally fragile. Protective, yes. But also manipulative in ways that hurt the people she claimed to love. The report recommended ongoing therapy for her and continued custody with me, with supervised visits for Rachel. I read it over and over. The validation was bittersweet, because the woman who had torn us apart was also someone who needed help. The question came down to forgiveness. Could I forgive? Could I let go? Some days I thought yes, some days no, because forgiveness didn't mean forgetting. It meant choosing peace over pain, choosing healing over hate. Sam and I started family therapy. We spoke in stories, in drawings, in silence. He began to trust again, to laugh again, to dream again. I still remember one session when Sam looked at me and said, "Grandma, do you think Mommy will be okay?" I squeezed his hand. "I hope so," I said. "And I hope you remember you're never alone." This journey has taught me more than I ever expected. About resilience, about love, about boundaries, and about the power of standing up even when the world tells you to sit down and be quiet. The knock came late on a rainy Thursday evening, soft but insistent. I wasn't expecting anyone. Mark had texted earlier, said he was working late. Sam was asleep upstairs. I wasn't sure if I should answer, but something inside me told me to. I opened the door, and there she stood. Rachel, soaked from the rain, her hair plastered to her face. Her eyes rimmed red, but it wasn't anger I saw. It was vulnerability. "I need to talk," she said, voice breaking. I hesitated, but stepped aside. She walked in slowly, sat on the edge of the couch. We sat across from each other in silence. Then she began. "I've been fighting all wrong," she whispered. "I thought I had to win, but I was losing everything." She looked down. "I'm scared. Scared of losing Sam, scared of losing Mark, scared of losing myself." Her hands trembled. "I don't want to hurt anyone." I listened. No interruptions, no judgments, just presence. Then she looked up. "Can you help me?" It was the question I never expected, and yet the one I'd been waiting for. We talked for hours, about her fears, her pain, her mistakes, the ways she'd pushed us all away, the way her love had become control. I told her about Sam's nightmares, about the coloring books, about the treehouse, about the slow healing. She cried. I cried. We found common ground. The next morning, Mark came home early. We sat together in the kitchen. Rachel was there too, not as an adversary, but as a woman seeking help. We agreed on family therapy, open communication, slow rebuilding. It wasn't perfect. It was messy and sometimes painful, but it was real. That night, I tucked Sam into bed. He smiled. "Grandma, thank you." I kissed his forehead. Always. The days that followed felt like walking on a tightrope, fragile, delicate, each step measured, each word chosen with care. Rachel was different. No longer the woman who forbade me from seeing Sam, but a woman wrestling with herself. Family therapy sessions became the battleground for honesty. We uncovered layers of fear, pain, and misunderstanding that none of us had expected. Rachel admitted her insecurities, how losing control meant losing identity. Mark shared his guilt, how he'd felt torn between two worlds. And I revealed my grief, the loneliness of being pushed away from someone I loved. Sam was the quietest in those rooms, but I watched him closely. Not just his words, but his silences. Slowly, the walls began to crumble. In therapy, Rachel began to see me not as an enemy, but as an ally. Mark started to open up about the pressure he'd felt, and I started to let go of the bitterness I'd carried. One afternoon, as Sam and I built a puzzle in the living room, Rachel came over and sat beside us. She didn't say much, just smiled gently. And that small gesture felt like a peace offering. We weren't healed, not yet, but we were trying. Forgiveness is not forgetting. It is choosing to move forward despite the pain. I reflected on the journey that had brought me here, from being locked out of Sam's life, to reclaiming his custody, to sitting together as a fractured family beginning to mend. I realize that sometimes the fiercest battles lead to the most fragile hopes, and that hope, however small, is worth everything. My name is Eleanor Whitmore. This story is not just about custody or courtrooms. It's about love, fierce, complicated, and often painful. It's about survival in the face of being erased. It's about finding strength when everything seems lost. When I first lost access to Sam, I thought I was losing a part of myself. The pain was raw, a slow creeping ache that colored every day, but it taught me something crucial. That love isn't just given. Sometimes it must be fought for. I won't pretend the journey was easy. There were moments of doubt, times I wanted to give up, times I questioned if it was worth the price. But every small step forward reminded me why I fought. The look in Sam's eyes when he whispered, "Grandma, I missed you." The hug that spoke louder than words. The quiet moments when he finally felt safe. I learned that family isn't always perfect. It's messy, fractured, and sometimes broken, but it can heal. If you're watching this, if you've been silenced, pushed away, or told, "You don't matter," know this: you do. Your voice matters, your love matters, and your story deserves to be heard. Thank you for listening. Please share your story in the comments.